Hey, Anna.
Hi, Abby. So excited to be here.
I mean, it's been a long time coming. I'm so happy to have you. And we're going to get into some topics today that we don't talk about often because you are a genius in the world of money and financial planning. So, why don't you start telling us how you ended up taking that road and about your company and your business? And then I know you have a personal story, so we can enter into that as soon as it feels good.
Yes, totally. I'm excited. And it's been a while since I've done interviews on the podcast. I'm also a podcast host. So
Yes,
it's great to be on this side of the table.
you have a great podcast. We'll definitely link out to it.
Yes. So I'd love, yes, we can talk about that more. But so I am a mom, a business owner, and a certified financial planner. So I started my career in personal finances. And I, right out of college, I quickly figured out that that was the route to go. Because when I started college, I was on the path to become a doctor. Like that was the thing to do. That's what
Wow.
my family wanted me to do. And that was the idea that I had in my head all along. But somewhere along the way, I was like, yeah, I don't know, this business school, or there's a, part of the campus that had this beautiful buildings where they had all the business classes were just like so exciting and attractive to me. And I've had enough chemistry and biology classes. And I was like, I'm done. So I switched my majors and I went into the business administration slash finance.
Mhm.
I didn't know anything about personal finance. It was all corporate stuff. And so last semester in college, I discovered an investment class. And that was kind of my first, stepping stone into learning that there's this whole other world out there to, help people, deal with their personal finances. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like godsend because I wanted to be a doctor and help people. Now I can help people with their money. So it's like perfect career. So I started on that track. I had to study additional years to get a certification to be certified. That's kind of like the gold standard in my industry, because anyone can call themselves a financial planner or a financial advisor, but you got to be careful, right? Because we're talking about very personal things here. And you just need to be, as a consumer, you just need to know who is the person giving you advice on what, because not everybody can do and say the same thing. So that's how I started. And then once I got into the industry, I figured out early on that I really wanted to focus on the planning aspect of personal finances, because the industry is really big and vast. There's investments, and anytime you hear somebody say financial planner, you kind of assume that, oh, they manage money, right? Or they sell insurance products. That's not entirely true. There is a space for all of that. But at the very core, and that's why I love what I do 20 years later, it is still an exciting part of my day when especially when I work with clients, it is getting to the core. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is that plan that you have for your life? And unfortunately, we have to have money to make it work. So I
Right.
love connecting those dots for clients and helping them live it through wherever you are. Maybe you're just starting out as getting married, having kids, or you're getting closer to retirement and you finished your career track. So it is all, within what I do in my day to day. Now, I also love to talk about personal finances. And so you mentioned a podcast. So I have a podcast called Money Boss Parent Podcast. And there I
Right.
talk, of course, all kinds of topics. And Abby, you were a guest
Yes.
before.
Yes.
um, but that's also not just personal finances. I'm also a mom. My son is 5.5, and so I want to explore topics that are just outside of money, because it all again is interconnected, and I love to draw parallels from one part to another, because we're like complete human beings. So I want to be able to talk about it all. And so I didn't start my company. I started working right out of college there as an intern, and then I became a pair planner. So I kind of had a track of getting into the industry, because again, it takes time. You have to have experience, and when you're like 22-year-old out of college, not many people want to, hire you as their financial planner, right?
Sure. Right.
So I had to do all of that. And then I just ended up being in at the right place at the right time, where the founder of our company, Main Street Financial Planning, was kind of, gearing up for retirement and trying to figure out what his options were and all of that. So it really naturally happened for me to be there. And I was like, you know what? I love this type of work, and I want to continue doing it. And I want to, have an opportunity to do it for more people. So I executed a succession plan with him. And so it's been 10 years since I bought the company. So it's been a hot minute
Wow.
here.
So were you 10 years post college with him and then 10 years on your own? Like you've just had this company this whole time.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. That is so
So
rare, I feel like.
yes, I feel like I've been in one company all my life, right? You don't see people do that anymore.
Right.
But I feel like I've had all kinds of different roles, right? Like starting from an administrative assistant to, becoming a financial planner to then putting my head for a business owner. And that is a completely different job than
Yes.
just being a financial planner. So even though it's been all in the same company, I've had different roles for sure.
You know what I find interesting when I think back to how we met at an event for moms, SoCal moms, which I still have a hard time going to mom events because of my infertility journey. I feel like, why does it have to be exclusive to moms? Why can't they say all women? What, right? Because when I
Mhm.
wasn't a mom, I was totally invited, but I was felt like shit because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be the only one there that's not a mom. Anyway, I
Yes,
bring all
I
of
hear
this
you.
up to say that there were tons of skincare companies, nutrition companies, workouts. You were basically the only financial table booth there. And it was such a smart idea because it's a piece of that pie that contributes to our daily wellness that we don't really think about. So, how do you put yourself out there and find moms and women and families to work with?
I mean, one avenue, and that's very true. And I relate to what you said. When I wasn't a mom, and I became a mom when I was 35. So
Yeah.
I don't know, in the modern world, I guess that's considered to be okay. But all my life, all my, younger years, I've heard from, family, friends, it's like, you're gonna be, it's like too late. Keep, start family
Right.
now. And it just happened for me that way, right? Although I didn't, my husband and I got married really young. We were in the last semester of college. We were just in love. That was
Wow.
cool.
And
So
you're
we
still
did.
together. You're still
We're
together.
we're still together, yes,
Love it.
this many years later, but having kids at 22 was not something that we wanted to do. So it was purposely, right? It was a plan that we put in place for ourselves. And so, yes, I remember vividly when a lot of our friends started having kids, right? And then, we weren't. It felt awkward at times, right? Or being in the circles when there were moms and you weren't. So I put a lot of effort into my business is my first baby,
Mhm.
early on. But so your question, to answer your question, is how do I put myself out there? I mean, one way is I want to talk openly about all the different challenges and issues families are having as they're growing together, as they're raising their kids, and especially when it comes to, personal finances. So like, what are some of the challenges that they're overcoming? So podcast is one way, where I get to have guests and explore interesting topics and ideas for myself in that regard, but also, help clients kind of explore these issues out there. So I've been doing that for quite some time. And then I also, go speak at conferences or, attend other podcasts just to share the message of, personal finances, because I believe at the core, and that's why I really stuck with this particular corner of my industry, which is like the planning focused, is that everyone out there, regardless of what your income is, what your assets are, or how good you are with money, or how bad you are with money, like those don't qualify you to have a plan. It's like a right. It's like you're supposed to have a plan, right? You just need to figure out how you can get it, who can be that person to help you. And I hold that at the core. So frankly, I can talk to anybody because anybody needs a financial plan.
Needs a
And
plan. I love
I
that.
just I can't get away from that idea. Yes, there's different levels of all of those qualifying things, but it's not important. Because you're going to have to make decisions about money every day. You're going to go out to lunch today, so you have to decide. You're going to go to McDonald's, you're going to go to, I don't know, more expensive, fancier, healthier cafe and spend more money. So those kinds of things are daily in our life. So we have to talk about it.
So, like, that's a perfect example. How would you help somebody make the decision of whether to go to McDonald's or go somewhere that feels more expensive, but maybe gives you a more nutritious option?
Yeah, I would say I would propose a third option. It's sort of my
Somewhere in the
joke, but
middle.
Yes, bring your own lunch.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
Make your own salad, because that would be probably the most cost effective. And I know, like, sometimes you have to make choices. But again, at the end of the day, it all still comes down to, what are you trying to accomplish? So what are your financial goals? Everybody talks about goals, right? And we have goals for all kinds of areas in our life, but financial goals are they're different, because they have once you have them identified, they have very specific elements about them. They have a date, right? A target date that you try and accomplish them by. I mean, one big example that everybody can relate to would be retirement. At some point, right? Like when I'm 55 or when I'm 60 or whatever that age that you pick, I'm going to retire. So like that's a date into the future. And then a second element would be like, what's the financial, like what's the dollars attached to that goal, right? Maybe a simpler one, like I'm going to go to vacation next year in the summer, right? So like that's at 12 months from now. And so how much money do you need for something like that? So once you become clear what these things are, decisions about what choices you're going to make, whether you're going to go out to lunch every day, right? Are you going to bring your own lunch, or you're going to save in a particular way? Are you going to spend less? It just becomes a lot easier for you to navigate that,
Because you're
versus
looking
like
through that one lens of that goal.
correct, because you
Okay.
know what you're working towards, right? Like you have like a target in front of yourself, and then the decisions, hopefully, right, once you outline it, that decision fatigue of like, okay, do I do this, do I do that, or was this a bad decision? It helps you kind of have that guide, or compass that you can work toward.
I love that. So I want to get into your personal story about IVF or treatment, but I really have so many questions that I get asked within the fertility world and money, and we can, in no particular order, but like, how do you feel about going into debt for infertility? How can people save for infertility? When should they start saving? Because I'm like superstitious. So I feel like if I were like, oh, I'm married, let's start saving for infertility, I'm jinxing myself and I'm going to have infertility, right? We get all crazy in our head about these things. So what kind of plan can my listeners who need money for fertility make? Because I mean, for me personally, we went into a lot of debt.
Mhm.
And I have no regrets about it. Like we talked about this on your podcast. I always felt like I would rather know that I did everything I possibly could to have my children than I could have had $20,000 more dollars in my bank account, right? For me, that was the
Right.
lens. But there's mixed feelings about that from financial planners and also from people going through it. So I'm curious where you stand on that.
Yes, I have lots of thoughts on it for sure. One, I think I can kind of start with, I have not met anyone yet, and personally have gone through the journey myself, who actually had like this perfectly outlined plan, to pay for fertility treatments. Because let's face it, most of us don't know that we may have a challenge, early in advance to start planning for something like that. Some of us, right? And I think, fairly recently, it became a thing where women who wanted to have, a career or wanted to have a business, they would freeze their eggs, right? So you like purposely would spend some specific amount of money to preserve the opportunity to have, family down the road. But if you look at our society in general, most people just find themselves in this situation all of a sudden facing a very, expensive cost that would come out of their pocket. That was the same for me. I had not given it much thoughts. I've heard about these options, but you never want to believe those things that people talk about, right? Until it happens to you. And so I mentioned this earlier. My husband and I got married really early, and so it was sort of a conversation of like, we will get to talk about having kids when we get to talk about having kids. And so over the years, and we were in our early 30s when this conversation started to become more serious, because we've done we're in kind of like in the midst of our careers. We've moved across the country, so we've tried a lot of things, traveled, and that was finally started finally feeling that something was missing. We're like, okay, let's start trying to have a child. And it just didn't happen according to all the, timelines that you're given. It just didn't happen for us. And then all of a sudden, I had to face, some treatments and diagnosis that was definitely not expected. It was definitely not covered by any insurance costs. And so we had to be creative. So if I think about all of your listeners out there. They're probably finding themselves in that kind of situation because for the most part, it's hard to predict something like that. Now, as a financial planner, where I would come in, at the point where you're like, okay, this is what we want to do. This is, all the chips are on the table. This is probably what it's going to cost us, is to sort of sit down and, do the most boring thing that all of us hate, but I feel like it's a grounding exercise. Like, create a budget, call it a fertility budget. And it's maybe a budget is a strong word, but like, make a list of all of the things that you could possibly anticipate for the cost, right? It could be all kinds of things: medications, procedures, consultations. I mean, you name it, whatever it is that will be out of pocket that insurance, for example, wouldn't cover, that would be your budget. Now, when I say word budget, a lot of people think like, oh my gosh, it's constrained, it's restricted, like we can't spend outside of that. No, it's not. It's really designed to help you start to see what are your options, right? Like, what are you dealing with in terms of, the actual dollars? And again, like that example I gave you about how having a specific goal in your financial plan really helps you be clear and purposeful about the decisions you're making. So if you know what all costs might be involved, now what you're doing is you're starting to look at the options of how you can finance something like that. And we can talk about financing options as well. But I feel like if you do these steps in this order, it just gives you more control about the situation, because it is hard, it is difficult, it is emotional, there's all kinds of things going on when you're going through this process. And so having kind of like a handle on it in terms of what it all might involve is really, really powerful. I've seen this firsthand with clients because, again, I get to talk to clients when they are announcing, like, we need to do fertility treatments, right? Like, Abby, you're a fertility coach. I mean, I think that's when people start to reach out to you and say, like, I got to talk to somebody, like, walk me through this.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's like, one step already in the process. So the other thing and for me, unfortunately, it was exactly the same situation. I found myself looking at our finances and saying, all right, this is what it's going to cost. We really want to have a family. Let's figure out where the money is going to come from. Because there was no way to go about it. And again, the time was not on my hands, right? At the time when I really started being serious about having a family. So with all of that, I had to, make decisions about the options and how fast we wanted for all of this to happen.
So how did you plan for it personally? What can you give us some of what you did?
Yes. So one example was we made a list of all of the potential costs. And again, also like with IVF treatments, those of you who've gone through it or going through it right now, sometimes you don't know, right? You might need treatments, you may need 3 treatments, or you may need more, right? Or you may need to take a break and come back for whatever reasons. So again, just like a financial planner, in my head, I had a number, and it really was based more looking at what our finances were. What do we have that we could, devote to accomplishing this goal? Now, this particular goal, and I feel like it kind of breaks some of these specific rules around, like, you mentioned going into debt, but because there's so much emotional aspect of it, like decisions you make about how to spend money is very different here. However, you can still apply these same principles. So one thing that I do recommend for clients, and if you have some time, like if, for example, you're anticipating to start, you already know what the costs are, you know what your budget is, what it, approximately is going to take in terms of dollar amount. And I had a client who actually took about a year to kind of put it all together. And it was really more around her career plan and, what she was doing at work. So it gave her some time to actually save, right, for the whole expense of the fertility treatments. Now, if you're kind of like me, you were right in it, and this is what you had to do. I had to have a surgery first. And then right after that, I kind of like just dove into, going with the process. I didn't want to wait anymore because I was worried that something else was going to happen. And so we had to go into our savings. And that's why I emphasize a lot for anyone, not just people going through fertility treatments, is to really consider how and where you have your emergency reserves. And this is one expense that I give you full permission to spend your emergency fund on. Okay. And this is, again, one of those reasons why we should have some emergency reserves. We can talk about what the general rules are for normal kinds of stuff, like if the roof leaks or if the tire breaks or whatever, right? But this kind of stuff is not atypical. However, in my mind, that was the place that I was comfortable going in. Now, just like you, Abby, I was prepared to do anything because I wanted to have a family. If we would have used all of our money from the emergency fund, next would have been, whatever account we had, right? Investment account. We had to go into debt. We would have gone into debt. So it was, we were that determined. But I realized that not everybody has the same financial situation. So if you don't have reserves, or if you don't have emergency fund, maybe we can talk about options like going into debt, right? Or other financing options that could help you get started on this path as well.
So like if you have an emergency fund or you have great credit and can maybe get a no interest credit card, would you recommend going for the emergency fund first, or maybe trying to finance it on a no interest credit card so that you also still have the emergency fund, knowing that you're still going to be making money that will hopefully be able to pay off that credit card?
I like the option if you can get cheap or inexpensive debt, right? Whether it's a credit card or personal loan, for you to consider using it. And if you have stable job, for example, right? Because a lot of us these days have our own businesses or our income is not as stable. So look at that kind of aspect first, because it's the same question, just from a different lens when clients are asking, do I pay my debt off first or I save in my emergency fund? This is kind of like the reverse of it.
Yeah.
If we have to do both, I'd like to do both. That way, because there could be other emergencies in your life aside from, going through fertility treatment. So if we can, tackle both, that would be great. These days, until further notice with our federal government and all the interest rate changes, savings accounts are earning really good interest. Now, credit cards, if you can manage to get a 0%, I don't know, for 12 or 18 months, that's great. But the longer, the term, the more interest and higher interest they're going to pay. So savings accounts or high yield savings accounts are like in the 5% range today. So if you have some money, right, there's just another tip how you can make extra money while you have some of your reserves there. And at the same time, you could be applying those towards fertility treatments. Now, when I was going through my treatments, I didn't really, first of all, it was shock. It was just like trying to figure out all of this stuff, and how sometimes you don't feel as good. And anyway, all of that. And plus, I worked for a small company, and these days I had no idea, right, that employers offered fertility benefits to their employees. Now, if you work for a company like Google or Apple or Microsoft, yeah, of course, they have the big deep pockets to offer those benefits, because traditionally health insurance, for the most part, unless you also work for a big company like that, gives you virtually no benefits. So I had no idea that stuff existed, right? My small company, right, offered the health insurance, but that was, as you know, only to cover certain things.
Right.
So
Minimal.
pretty much, everything came out of pocket. So I didn't care, right, to look further, explore things like, loans we did look at, right? And for this space, it all comes down to personal loans, right? Because there's no collateral to, like it's not a loan that you can secure with something, or business, or like a, a building, or like a home. So these are going to be unsecured loans, and they're generally, higher interest, because they're only the bank only is banking on you to pay it back. But I did realize that there's a universe of exists out there where you can get scholarships or grants. Grants probably is a better word. But basically, there are organizations that are so passionate about people having families, right? And there's lots of different qualifications of how you can apply for these grants. But it is huge. It's out there, it's available. And when I first learned about it, it was after we'd already had done all of the, all of the treatments. And I think my son was already born. So it was kind of like, later on.
Yeah.
I realized it's like, oh my gosh, it's like going to college, right? You go to college or you apply to college and you start to look for scholarships and grants and all of these options. And it is amazing what you can find out there. So and if you'd like, Abby, we can put all of this in the show notes too, but organization called resolve.org. Maybe you're familiar with it. Oh my
Yes,
gosh, they
we
had
talk about it. Yeah.
a huge library of providers for all kinds of grants that families can apply for. And I looked at it, I was like, I couldn't believe that this existed. And so I started to think, like, why would these organizations want to give money, right, to just regular people? And I mean, it kind of sort of came full circle because, again, having gone myself through it in my family, I'm like, yeah, I would totally support an organization like that, so that someone can have a chance at being a parent, because
Right.
that's the best.
Yeah.
So
So go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to close on that. So I wherever you are in your financial situation, right, and you're faced with these unexpected costs, I think it's just worth sitting down and kind of considering what your options are. I know how it may feel in the moment when you're like, you've been waiting for so long and like the time is not on your hand and you're like, it totally get it. And I know that that's probably the best part. The best advice I can give you is to give yourself some grace and patience that these things will unfold, because only then you can make really good decisions. And so assess what options are there. If you don't have, a robust emergency fund, then maybe we should defer to a, credit card for a short period of time if it has 0%. Maybe we need to explore loans, right, from these organizations, and there's a ton, or start looking at these grants. It does take time, right, for applications and deadlines. I would also suggest, I mean, I know sometimes these things are so personal and you don't want to discuss it with friends and family, but maybe asking them to help. And I wish I would have done that, but my husband and I sort of kept things secret, because after a while, because when you've been asked so many times is when you're going to have kids, you're like, I don't want to freaking talk about it.
Of course.
And
And
now
you
all of
guys
a
had been
sudden,
together for so long. People must have been asking for years.
and they gave up after a while, but then all of a sudden we're going to come out and say, oh my gosh, we need money for fertility. That kind of raises, a lot of worry and concern. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to have to deal with that. So, but if your family dynamic is different, right? And if you have a supporting, whoever it is, mom and dad or brother or sister, an aunt, and you could go and ask for help, I think that's just as good. And for the most part, those people probably you're the first to help, because
Yeah.
don't they want grandkids or, nephews
Right.
and nieces?
Yeah.
Um,
So let's
so
just talk briefly about your personal journey, because I know you said you had surgery. So when you ultimately got diagnosed, did you know you were going to need to go to IVF?
So I did, because I couldn't get pregnant on my own, and I had a really severe case of endometriosis, and I had no
Mm,
idea.
yeah.
I
Isn't that crazy?
it is totally crazy. I've always I've accepted the fact that my periods were heavy all my life. It just was a normal thing, and that's like one of the symptoms that you do have endometriosis. And I had a really severe case of it. I was like, nothing hurt other than just like, having a really, really heavy period for like extended period of time. And so once that was diagnosed, because I couldn't get pregnant on my own, that was kind of like the first natural step. And because of the endometriosis being so severe and like impacted, my ovaries and the uterus, like I had to go fast about it. So that's where I was like, we didn't have time to like figure out and go do like, wait around and think. And so I did. And I had to do first time, I had the surgery first. We did 2 rounds of IVF. And then 6 months later, I had to have a follow-up surgery. And then we did
Mm.
another 2 rounds. And so it took a while for sure, for all of this to kind of clear out and to work through. For the
Do you,
second round,
yeah.
it's not any different, right? You're
Mhm.
still, it's like I didn't feel like there was a break. None of this is like you're not taking any breaks. It's just how the timing of all of this works, right? And my body needed rest from all of that. But yeah,
Well, it sounds like when you had your rest period from IVF, you were doing surgery. So it's not
yes.
exact, not really
It's not a
rest.
rest. It was not a rest for anything. Yeah, surgery was covered for the most part. For the most part, I say because I went to a specialist here
Right.
in the Bay Area and he was out of my network. So I still had, cost out of pocket. Luckily, I did the surgery, like both surgeries in one calendar year. And this is something to think, I mean, again, to think about post fact.
Totally.
It was a little bit less expensive because I only had to meet that one deductible in that calendar year, but all the other costs were all out of pocket.
Yeah.
So there was no way to hide or come up with some clever ideas. So yes, but again, I was totally determined. My husband and I, we're in this together, even though women tend to go through this
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
kind of on the front lines, but we were determined, right, to go through it, whatever it takes to make sure that we had a baby. So, but it did take all in like a little over 3 years from like start to finish, from the point where we're like, finally we're told this isn't going to work. You can't do it on your own. And here are some options. So it was that, I feel like it's that long. 3 years is a long time. Although looking back, I'm like, wow, it kind of went fast. I don't know, at times, right? But when you look at your kids, and my son is 5.5 now, I was like, wow, it was all worth it. I mean, there's not a day in my, that I live past all of that I think like this was, a bad decision, or we didn't, because one of the things you do, as you go through this, your life doesn't stop. The everything else continues to move on, right? You continue to work, or, whatever it is that you do. At the same time, your personal financial life continues to go on too. Maybe you continue to pay off your debts, you continue to save. So all of these things are still happening. And so then I look back at this and say, all right, well, maybe that particular year, or over the course of these 3 years, while all of this came together, we spent more money on the fertility treatments and we didn't put as much into our savings accounts, right, or investment accounts. And that's okay, right? Because it got us to a point of having a family, which was like the biggest goal to have.
Worth
So
it.
you got to give yourself some grace for this. Like you have to. And I was totally cool if I told my husband, like, if we have to work whatever, a few more years to meet whatever targets we had, or even in retirement, right? So be it, right? Like those were like the sacrifices that I was willing to make. And I would do
Amazing.
it all over again.
Yeah. Same.
Yes,
I
right.
mean, I'm glad I don't have to, but same.
Correct.
I like to ask people at the end to just wrap up with either a phrase or a saying or a piece of advice that either you give or you get. It doesn't have to be money related, but just something that you think about, maybe something you tell your son often that you bring into your world every day, or
I
close to.
have 2 things. One thing I do say as it relates to personal finances is that you are the boss of your own money. So like, just because sometimes we forget that, like we consider money as something evil at times, or when we don't have enough of it, it's maybe scary to us, or even when we have a lot of it, it might be creating all kinds of emotional things. So it's a tool. So consider that when you are going through your life and whatever challenges might be. But what I do say to my son, and I've had this, I remember when I started working at my current, financial planning company 20 years ago, we had a poster in the office, and it was Winston Churchill, like, this grim face. The founder of our company liked him, and so he liked the quote. And I think a lot of you would be familiar with it, but it said, never, never, never give up. And I remember, as a young, college graduate, staring at that poster for like days. And I was like, okay, I get it. But then when the life happened, I realized what it finally meant. So all these years later, I remind myself, right, from time to time, because it could be difficult. And I also remind my son that that's the motto I want you to have. Like you if you go through whatever challenges you're facing, and you consider this as like, there's no way out, you have to go, and you don't give up until you get it, you will succeed one day.
I love it. Anna, thank you so much for being here. I love these tips, and I can't wait for people to reach out when they need help saving for fertility.
Thanks so much, Abby.